Welcome to AGM, everyone. My name is Carmen Morad. I would like to welcome you to a program with the Stanislaus County Sheriff, Jeff Dirkse. Welcome to the program, Sheriff.
Oh, thanks, Carmen. Thanks for having me. It's been a while.
It has been a while. I would like to begin by thanking you for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule, Sheriff. It has been
Happy
a
to do it
while.
anytime. Yeah.
Um, you were so gracious to stop by at the Assyrian American Civic Club a few years. It seems like a lifetime ago. It was only, what, 3 years ago when you were running as a
Yeah.
candidate.
Yep. Yes. 4 years ago, because it's already, unfortunately, re-election season. So, yeah. But I thought I was on once after that, too.
Yes, you were. Absolutely, you were. You make yourself available. We have access to you, Sheriff. Whether I text you, call you, or invite you to our organization, you always make time, which is greatly
Right.
appreciated.
Yeah.
So, when we spoke last time, we talked about public safety. We talked about your vision of your leadership as a sheriff. And here we are. It's been 4 years, as you said. We talked about realignment. We talked about public safety, homelessness, and array of other staff and personnel goals that you had. But we could not have imagined a pandemic
Hmm.
that would hit our community, our life, our way of living so hard. And of course, the other topic on our mind today, Sheriff, is the social justice and equity and unrest that you are working so hard to resolve in our community. Let me ask you first, Sheriff, how has COVID-19 impacted policing for you as a leader and in our Stanislaus County Sheriff Department?
Yeah. Um, so there have been a number of impacts. And I won't really belabor the typical impacts that everyone is aware of masks and social distancing, and things got closed, and everyone is aware of that. But specifically on that law enforcement front, there were a few impacts that were really counterproductive to public safety, in my opinion. First, for a period of time, we had what was called zero bail, where normally the bail schedule is set by every superior court, so 58 of them across the state, one for every county, and they set their own bail for a crime. So, grand theft auto might be $10,000. But what happened when COVID hit, with kind of the intention of reducing jail populations to prevent the spread of COVID, they changed the bail schedule statewide to $0 for a number of crimes, virtually every misdemeanor and many of our felonies. So when someone was arrested for a crime, again, I'll use grand theft auto, bail was $0. So by default, we booked them in the back door. They automatically made bail because it was $0. And by law, once someone makes bail, I no longer can hold them. And they would literally walk out the front door within a couple of hours. So what we saw is, many people out there just repeat offenders because they don't care about COVID. And, so they're out there just, preying on our community. Fortunately, we have virtually eliminated zero bail now, but that was a significant kind of COVID-driven impact that affected law enforcement and the community in general. The other very related issue to that is the state reduced the state prison population by 30,000 inmates in the last year. And so these are individuals who are convicted of a felony. And so in order to get sent to state prison now, you have either you have either been convicted of a very serious felony, or you've had multiple felony convictions to kind of build your resume, if you will, to get you sent to prison. But by releasing them early, they're not rehabilitated, they're just released early. And so they dumped 30,000 inmates out, that had not completed their sentences, back onto the community. And I don't know what we're at today. We're over 800 that have been released early back into Stanislaus County. And 40% of them reoffend within 4 months. So for people that should be in prison now, my team has to deal with them either on the street or in our jails. And and they're out there. I mean, if they're getting rearrested, that means that they're committing another crime, usually not often a fairly egregious crime. 4 of those individuals that reoffended early, or that were early releases that have reoffended, are in my jail now for murder. And at least one of those murders was committed while that individual should have been in state prison. So, at the end of the day, what you have is you've had a lot more criminals back out on the street doing a lot more crimes, and that has had a negative impact on our community, and it's all directly tied to COVID.
I see. Sheriff, I follow your articles in our local paper, the Modesto Bee, and this is one of the articles that you were very direct about. What is our community doing to make sure that legislatures at state level are aware of this problem? Is this something that we can do something about as voters, as constituents, because it is a problem. We talked about it when realignment first began,
Mm-hmm.
but how does it impact staff? How does it impact the number of your deputies? One of the things we talked about was that you have been able to have more deputies on staff, but this puts, with all the challenges that we're talking about with COVID and within policies that come because of COVID, what is there something that we can do as members of a community that are impacted by this releasing of state felons back into our communities?
Yeah, the simplest thing for you to do is to reach out to either our elected assembly members, Adam Gray, kind of for the south part of our county, or Heath Flora for the north part of the county. Now, I speak with both of them regularly, and they are fully in agreement with me on this, that this is ridiculous that the state has done this. Now, the state has now stopped the early releases, but in my opinion, the damage has been done. And in this criminal justice reform aspect, the pendulum has swung way too far, and it maybe does not need to come all the way back the other way, but we need to find a happy medium in there where we hold criminals accountable. But both Heath and Adam, as our local assemblymen, they fully agree with me. They support public safety. They support holding criminals accountable. The challenge that we have in California is that the population centers, so Southern California, the Bay Area, Sacramento, they tend to not agree with us, and we simply get outvoted, is the simplest way to put it. So with that, in addition to the assembly members, reach out to the state senators, whether it's Susan Eggman, Ana Caballero, and express to them the frustration that the public has with this threat to their safety. Write a letter to the governor and express that frustration, because that's what it is. When you have more criminals on the street, like I said, they're not rehabilitated. 40% of them are reoffending within 4 months. That's not rehabilitation. Statistically, 70% of all prison inmates that have been released reoffend within 3 years. And I would say that with 40% doing it within 4 months, we're well ahead of that, because when they were released early, there was no plan for them. Many of them, they had nowhere to go. They had no job. Well, if we're going to look at getting them rehabilitated and keeping them out of the life of crime, simply releasing them does not do that, because they tend to fall back into their old ways. So all of this was done without a plan. But again, specifically to your question, the public needs to reach out to their elected legislators, because that's where a lot of this is coming from. And again, not our local assemblymen, they're very supportive of us. But the rest of our elected legislators across the state, they need to feel it too.
Sheriff, just to be more informed as a member of the community, are these felons that are from our county, or
Yeah.
are they felons from all over the state? And how, if they are not originally from here, who makes that decision for them to be reallocated to our county?
Yeah. Now, the vast majority of them are originally from our county. They tend to be released back to wherever their original home was, the county where they got convicted. It is not always the case. There are occasions where perhaps someone is released, their friends, family, parents, whoever live in another county, so they end up going back to that other county because it is now home for some reason. But that is not a large portion of them. That is not what is creating the problem for us. It is the simple fact that these people, these individuals are someone, they've offended from our county originally, but they're being released early and they're back in our county.
I see. I think for those voters, for those residents of our county who are truly impacted by this situation, it is a good idea, as you said, to release that frustration into better communication, more
Mhm.
effective communication with our lawmakers. That takes me to the next topic, Sheriff, that we discussed, which is homelessness.
Mhm.
It is homelessness when it comes to, Stanislaus County with focus on prevention. As you know, it's been going on for a while. What progress has been made when it comes to, we do know that substance abuse plays a role. We do know that incarceration plays a role. And we also know that mental health plays a huge role. In the progress since you've been sheriff, what can you share with us that our county is doing, especially with in regards to law enforcement and what you see when you come in contact with residents who are experiencing homelessness?
Yeah. I will say, I'll be very blunt and upfront and say, sadly, we have not done what
Mhm.
we wanted to do. And with that, we've been given the excuse of the century with COVID. And we were on a very, very good path about 18 months ago. We specifically with law enforcement, we have a meeting every month we call it LEX, the law enforcement executives. It's myself, all the police chiefs, the district attorney, chief probation officer, et cetera. We were on a very good path on a number of fronts for us to deal with homelessness from the true law enforcement perspective, right, which is enforcing the law and holding people accountable. As being homeless is not a crime. We don't arrest people simply because they're homeless. But I will acknowledge that many homeless do commit crimes. A lot of those crimes are low level, not all, but a lot. They're low level misdemeanor type of crimes, and trespassing, littering, being somewhere they're not supposed to, some petty theft, and so on. So what happened is we had changed how we held some people in jail, specifically focusing on individuals that have what we call a failure to appear. So and specifically three or more. So and a failure to appear means that they're not going to court to have their case resolved. So we changed some of our policies to hold people with three or more FTAs, failures to appear, and that kept them in custody until they at least made one court appearance. And our jail count jumped in the space of about 6 weeks by about 100 people. Um, I say all of that because this was all pre-COVID. Well, then once that zero bail hit, in there we had I think it's the Morris decision out of Boise, where the Ninth Court ruled that you can't say push homeless folks out of a park unless you have a place to send them to, a shelter, some sort of a bed. Excuse me. Well, what that did for us is, from the law enforcement side, somebody is sleeping in a park. If we did not have a bed space to direct them to, we couldn't enforce whatever law or ordinance was in effect to get them out of the park. So you found things that were just taken over, and that was actually pre-COVID. But all of that kind of hit. So when COVID hit, a lot of homeless enforcement stopped. Well, in the last few months, we have gotten back into that role, but we have regressed, not so much on the law enforcement side, but just in the community side. And I don't mean this as a knock on anyone, because there are some great organizations out there doing great work to address homelessness. The problem is COVID just kind of squished a lot of the efforts, or kind of desynchronized them. So but we are to the point now. We all realize COVID is still going on, but where we are starting to re-engage in a lot of these conversations. If anybody out there reads the Modesto Bee, they just wrote an article on it that was published on Sunday, about an idea that we have I refer to them as campgrounds. And there's great debate over that. and there is no consensus on this yet. And that article was, I thought, well written, but also, and from my standpoint, premature, because we're just not far enough along yet. But the question that I think the public needs to address, answer to themselves and ultimately to their local elected officials, is how is it that you want us to deal with the homeless? Because if you drive through our community right now, whether it's Turlock or Modesto or Ceres or out in the county or wherever, we see homeless individuals really everywhere, right? They can be kind of spread out. They can be in an alley along the side of a road, railroad tracks, parks, whatever the case may be. We do not have enough bed space in our various shelters to kind of force them into that arena. So the proposal is that we create campgrounds, not in parks, right? So we're not going to give up a community park. It would have to be some other piece of land, and they would be small. It would not be like Mo's, the Modesto Outdoor Emergency Shelter, that was very large, 350, 400 people. They would be much smaller, 25 to 50 people, a lot more controllable. And what we've learned as a result of Mo's is some of the social dynamics that come into play. When you get large, they kind of take on a life of their own, as opposed to if they're small, they're a lot more manageable. But the reason that is important, because if we had a dozen of these across the county with, maybe with a personnel capacity of 50 people each, well, now you're talking about 600 beds, right? Campsites, but beds that homeless could be in. And then if you couple that with our various emergency shelters, whether it's the Salvation Army, Turlock Gospel Mission, whoever it may be, that are out there, we finally get the capacity to host all of our homeless folks in a designated bed space somewhere. So what that means from the law enforcement standpoint is that we can go out there and truly enforce it and tell people, you can't be here in this park, you can't be here along the side of the road, or the train tracks, or whatever the case may be, but you may go camp, here, or here, whatever, wherever is an appropriate spot. So that question is, does the public want to see them generally everywhere, or do they want to see them in designated spots? And that's kind of a question that I'm going to be asking of the public. How do you see this solution coming? And then the long-term goal would be that people don't camp in these campgrounds into perpetuity, right? They might go in there. It allows our outreach teams, they know where the homeless are. They can go engage with them, offer them services, a pathway out of there. So that's the concept of it. We're just not there yet. And sad to say, but when you're talking about, this is a government-driven thing, a program, it will take time. And because we want consensus on this. If we think that this is going to be the best way to do it, we want buy-in across our county. What we don't need is, the county or one city doing one solution that's not mirrored county-wide, because then what you find is, while the homeless are somewhat geographically centered, they may just get pushed kind of over some jurisdictional boundaries, and there's no real solution there. It's just kind of, pushing them around, and it's kind of like pushing water. You push it one direction and it just sort of spills out, the other around that.
Sheriff, I actually heard your radio interview with Councilman Rickey that, of course, was reflected in the Modesto Bee article. But when you said districting and location, when I spoke with our former mayor, Ted Brandwald, on that particular encampment in Modesto, the problem was it became so popular. There were homeless people traveling there from other states. And because it became a point of destination, it became where they knew they could be. There were services, they were being, and I hate to use this word, enabled.
Mm-hmm.
But is this something that will be the vision that you have? Will it be something restricted to Stanislaus County? How do we know people who are going to be there in that encampment are from Stanislaus County, and the services that are being provided are to those homeless individuals that our county feels or is responsible for?
Yeah. I don't have a good answer for that yet as to how we vet that. Again, because like I said, we're very early in this discussion, and how the execution happens, we're not there. But what I will tell you, from our point in time counts, there's roughly 2,200 homeless across Stanislaus County, whether it's in Modesto or the county or Turlock, whatever. 2,200. 80% of them are from our county. And typically if they're from Modesto, or if they're homeless in Modesto, they're probably from Modesto, or they may have come here from somewhere else because of potential family or something like that. But while we do occasionally see people that are homeless that move in, it is fairly uncommon. It is not the norm. So that is certainly a concern as we move forward. We are not here to provide services to other people from other counties per se, right? That should be their responsibility. But what I will say too, with this campground idea specifically, we would provide extremely limited resources at the campground. Basically, the concept that I have in my head is, again, it's that designated space. It has actual campsites, but we don't provide tents. We don't provide clothes. We don't provide, if you have a tent you're using, along the railroad tracks, that's what you're putting in here. We would provide running water, some sort of toilet facility, porta potty, whatever, and trash collection, so that these places don't turn into a junk heap. But overall, it's not like at Moe's where they had all the tents that were the same. We're not providing any of that, so it would be very minimal. It's simply the focus on the campground. Again, this is specific from my lens as the sheriff. Is it lets my team enforce the rules of getting them out of, again, well, I'll just say the public, right? Again, the alleys, the streets, the businesses, the railroad tracks, and into designated spots.
Sheriff, this is such a complex situation. For years now in our county, first we started to understand what causes homelessness and how to prevent individuals to become in that percentage of being the visible homeless person, individuals who experience it. So I know this is ongoing, and thank you for sharing your perspective through your lens of our sheriff and law enforcement. I do believe this is an ongoing thing, and it will take a lot of ideas such as yours and a lot of cooperation and consensus, as you said, to improve the situation. I'm not sure it would be feasible to say to completely eliminate it and alleviate it, but it is where we can see progress. That's why I asked that in my beginning question. Do we see progress? Because I serve on different commissions and committees, and I see the millions of dollars that is being spent in our county, that is going for housing, that's going for rehabilitation, and for all other nonprofits that are helping out and doing their part. It will be refreshing to see progress where our taxpayer money is being spent and how we can make an improvement. So hopefully we'll ask these questions of you next time, and hopefully you will.
I'll have a definitive answer for you.
Yes, definitely. I look forward to that. Sheriff Dirkse, let's talk about a project that you're working on that involves the community called Project Resolve. I've been reading about it. I've been sharing different thoughts and ideas from different community members. Please let our viewers know what Project Resolve is, how it came to be, and what your goals are for putting this committee together.
Yeah. So last year, everybody in America is well aware of the George Floyd incident that happened in Minneapolis, and the challenges that brought for law enforcement, for our communities, for race relations, and everything with that. And so Project Resolve started actually with a conversation between my wife and I, and we were driving somewhere, I don't recall. But how do we address some of this stuff in our community? So that conversation led to some various ideas that we talked to some of my staff, here at the sheriff's office, and what we determined the best course of action would be for law enforcement, the sheriff's office, to reach out to community partners to convene a council, a group of people to sit down and discuss all of these issues. A few minutes ago, I referred to Lex, the organization involved myself and all the police chiefs. So discussed it with Lex. Everybody was on board with doing it. And so that's 13 of us. And then we reached out to, originally we had 35 to 40 or so total members from across the community. And we really tried to hit every type of demographic that we could think of, realizing that we missed some. When you talk about 1,500 square miles of Stanislaus County and everything that is represented within that, and keeping a manageable group size, that gets to be difficult. But so we started with what now I call Project Resolve 1.0. It was the first iteration of it. The original intention is that we were going to meet 3 times over a period of 6 months. I think it was last July. July, September, November, and then the goal was that by January 1st of this year, 2021, we were going to have 6 to 10 tangible things that we could do in Stanislaus County to address some of the challenges that we've seen. Now, we don't want to focus on national level or the state of California. We want to talk about here in our county, what can we do? So as we got into Project Resolve, it became very apparent in the first couple of meetings that there was a lot more information to generally cover than 3 meetings was going to get done. I think we ended up with 10 meetings, and I would tell you we still didn't cover everything. But what we did was, after kind of the introductory meeting, was we really started to present information on how law enforcement works. And some of that, pull back the veil, if you will, and open it up. And here's what we do, say, for our internal affairs process, our discipline process. What happens in an officer-involved shooting, right? How does that investigation look? What are our use of force stats? And we did everything based off of the sheriff's office, right? All the other agencies participated as well, but most of us do the same type of procedure for things, but we just pulled out all of our stats at the sheriff's office and laid them out for the group. And we really try to answer questions around that, what's clear, what's not clear, and discuss a lot of the issues around things. And I say that because, the public often says, well, why won't you release this information? Well, sometimes I will say law enforcement doesn't have a good answer for that. Well, we've never released it, so why should we? Right? Well, we as a profession need to get through that and realize, no, there's no reason for us to hold this information. We can put that out. Sometimes, though, there are very legitimate reasons to hold it. If it's an investigative purpose, right, we have to make sure that possible witnesses aren't tainted by reading something in the paper that they then tell us they knew at the time of the incident, right? We can't have that. We need to know if they know it or not. And then enter in all of the Peace Officer Bill of Rights, right? Staff here at any law enforcement agency, if they're involved in an incident, they have certain rights and privileges that are afforded to them, right, for their own legal protection, just like many other professions do. So we have to kind of unpack all of that and make sure that people understand the scope of why we do or don't do things. We talked a lot about use of force and why that happens, and statistically how often it happens. I'm not going to remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it was almost a 5-year period. It was from January 1st of 2016. I believe it was through September 30th of 2020. So almost, 1 quarter shy of 5 years. And again, I'm going to mess up the numbers, but we had over 400,000 calls for service at the sheriff's office in that time. And I think about 1,185 or 90 of them had any kind of use of force, period. Now, that's not a shooting. That's, what we would call a control hold or a takedown or a baton or something like that. Canine apprehension. That works out to 0.24 uses of force by percentage. So it's basically 1 out of every 400 calls for service has any use of force. And when we start talking about lethal incidents, right, usually a shooting, but not exclusively, there were, in that 5-year, almost 5-year time frame, I think we had 10 lethal uses of force, and it's like 0.02%, total. And so the reason why I say that's important, or why we talked about that, because there are hundreds of law enforcement interactions across our county on any given day, not just with the sheriff's office, but with the other organizations as well. And the stuff that makes the media is maybe some sort of significant use of force or major critical incident. What most people don't see are the hundreds of interactions that occur that are very peaceful and perfectly normal. So data is important. But one of the other things that we learned in Project Resolve is also, so there's this issue of data, right? And we're a very data-centric profession, right? It's not what we know, it's what we can prove. But people that have had a negative experience with law enforcement, maybe just one time, or maybe it's a secondhand experience, right? My friend had some really bad experience with the cops. Well, that creates a lens that they view all law enforcement negatively. So we have to learn this balance of data versus that individual perspective, and both are valid. As a very data-centric profession, we have to realize that some people have that negative lens that they look at us from. And then some of those people that had that one negative experience also have to realize that that is a very unusual, infrequent occurrence. And so there's a balance there that we have to find. So we talked a lot about that with Project Resolve. We did, one of the data points that came out was, one of the questions that was asked is, how does our community view law enforcement? Not on some national average or the state again, but how does our community view law enforcement? So we commissioned a poll, and we hired a nationally known firm. Cost us like $51,000. The county paid for half, and I got donations for half of it. So it was kind of a public-private partnership. And we commissioned this poll, and they did their thing. Very, the typical scientific type of polling that occurs. And what they came back with was, somewhere between 72 and 75. There's some very nuanced details in there, but 72 to 75% of our population has a favorable opinion of local law enforcement. And they make virtually no distinction between the sheriff's office, Modesto PD, Turlock series, et cetera. They just kind of view us all the same, which was an interesting fact that we did not really realize, that, there is this idea of branding. It's the sheriff's office. The public just doesn't really care about that. They just view law enforcement as law enforcement. But I really took that as a very positive thing, that our community strongly supports us, because we, as a profession in Stanislaus County, do good work. I think we hold ourselves accountable, and I think that we have a strong relationship with our community, and it works both ways. And so that was good. On the flip side, we cannot focus solely on, hey, we've got 70%, 75%, we're good to go. No, we need, like one of the challenges that I gave to my staff, I sent that poll out to all of them, and I said, let's take a step. What would it take for us to get to 80%? Right? If we go out there, and let's face it, when you interact with cops, we're not going to make everybody happy. Because if you're dealing with me or a member of my team, something bad has probably happened. Whether you're the victim of a crime or you've committed the crime, you're typically not very happy to deal with us. So, we have to keep that in mind. But could we get to 80%? And if so, what could every member of my team be doing to get there, right? So if we deal with Carmen on the street, how can we leave you happy, or at least happier? And maybe happy isn't the right way, but satisfied that you received a professional service from your law enforcement. And so that's the challenge. And when we get to 80, the challenge will become 85. And if we get to 85, then the challenge becomes 90. And so, but how can we continually make ourselves better? Because we do need to focus on that percentage of our population that is dissatisfied with law enforcement services.
Sheriff, this is where leadership comes in. When you said that when usually someone comes into contact with law enforcement officers, a crime has happened, you're either a victim or you are being investigated or you are the perpetrators. That is very important. It's
Mhm.
not necessarily a happy occasion, but it
Mhm.
is a necessary service that you provide for our public safety. That's very important to understand.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us and with our viewers. Perspective is extremely important for someone who's not involved in any of these cases as a victim or on the other side. It's very easy to judge what goes on, what can happen. But going back to this project, I have been reading the articles, I have been listening to you on the radio, and it's very important to have you share your ideas and tell us when you don't have an answer. I think that transparency is part of the leadership that is so necessary for us. To just tell people this is how it is, this is how we do things is different. But to know that we are exploring, we are looking into something, a situation or a mindset in our communities against law enforcement that really has accelerated to a point where we need to have conversations.
Mhm.
So thank you for sharing that. And I will be participating in Project Resolve. Thank you for the invitation. The Assyrian community is very much pro law enforcement,
Yes.
pro law and order.
Well, and with that too, I should say we did finally end Project Resolve 1.0 in, I think, in June, May
Mhm.
or June. And while it was a success, I think it's an unqualified success. What we have transitioned to is now what I call Project Resolve 2.0. Because one of the things that we discussed out of that group was that we did not necessarily have everybody at the table that we need at the table. Youth were not represented, and we knew that going into it. There's some challenges figuring out how do you get youth in, and what youth do you reach out to. We had missed certain demographics, not intentionally, but we just, like I said earlier, it's tough when you're talking about 1,500 square miles and all of the 9 cities that are in there, all of the other towns that are in there, the neighborhoods. Um, you know, we have a diverse county. How do you get somebody from every group in there? So one of the key takeaways from the first Project Resolve was we need to continue Project Resolve into 2.0 and continue the conversation. We're also looking at what we call the Weed and Seed program. It's an old program that we're looking to bring back. We can have a whole separate show on that. We are looking at a lot more youth engagement, community forums, and so on. So we got to 5 tangible things that we are going to continue talking about moving forward. Didn't get to 6 to 10, but that 5 is probably a good number. But it is an ongoing, the takeaway is that it's an ongoing process and project. So thank you for being part
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. And as the co-chair and founder of the Assyrian Wellness Collaborative, a contracted partner with Stanislaus County BHRS, Prevention and Early Intervention, it will be my pleasure to attend. We are the liaison between our community and Stanislaus County. And it is the importance of resources and connecting people to care and services and the information that we share with members of our community via our media or meetings. It's very important to let them know that our sheriff is transparent, that our sheriff has easy access. I want to reiterate that every time I have texted you, called you, emailed you, you have been so attentive and so quick in your responses in connecting me and whatever project or question that I had, and whether it was directly from you or someone you referred me to. That is very important, and that also needs to be shared with the rest of the community. Sheriff, thank you again so
of.
much for spending this time with me. In closing, what would you like to share with our viewers on everything that we discussed today?
Well, I will tell you, we kind of talked about COVID and some of the impacts. The last 18 months specifically has been really kind of an unprecedented ride, not just with COVID, which we're all dealing with, but last summer we had the largest wildfire in Stanislaus County history up on the West County. We dealt with that. We had a lot of, not a lot, but we had some civil unrest and some protests last year that we collectively as law enforcement had to deal with, and I think that we collectively handled that well. And so it's been a challenging 18 months that for our profession and really our whole community. But I think that we have really come through it well. As specifically as the sheriff's office, we are in the strongest position that we've been in the last 10 years. Our staffing is good. We have a really excellent team of young men and women that are here to serve our community. And I am proud of everything that they do every day. So though it's been a crazy 18 months, we are in a good shape.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And
Thank
personally,
you.
I'd like to tell you, thank you for keeping us safe. Thank you for all your service, for all you're doing. And I would like to leave this open invitation. We are a partner to our sheriff department, to Stanislaus County, to improve the quality of life for all, especially our community. So thank you again for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Carmen. And one last thing I should add,
Yes.
people can email me personally directly through the homepage of the sheriff's office. On the homepage, there's an email the sheriff button. If there's any issues, anybody that they want to reach out on whatever front, click on that button. That email comes to me and me alone. Nobody else reads it. And so, yeah, I'm pretty reachable. I reply to everybody. It might take a day or so, but I reply to everybody.
Yes, you do. And I can testify to that. Thank you again for all you do. Again, I would like to invite you to come back or have us over our community as a representative. I'll be more than happy to share the progress that our Stanislaus County Sheriff Department is making.
Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you so much. This concludes my conversation with Stanislaus County Sheriff Jeff Dirkse. Join me on the next program on AGN. This is Carmen Morad.